All right, so we're already live on YouTube because there is no delay there, which is fine. And I'll make sure that we're good on the Facebook side, and then we will get started here. Fantastic. All right. Wait for that to flip. We'll wait for that to flip back. All right. And here we go. All right, everybody, a good Monday evening to you. It is hard to believe that we are getting very close to Christmas time and closer to the end of the year. I'm forecaster Nick Dunn at the green screen tonight, something I haven't done in a little while, unless you were fortunate enough to watch me on TV. I've also welcomed via audio this evening by meteorologist Mike Joyce and forecaster Tyler Phillips, so hopefully you guys can hear them okay once we bring them in. Obviously, the big talk tonight, folks, is going to be our winter storm that we continue to obviously keep our eyes on. We still have a couple days before things really get going and before impacts really start to move in. Mike, you and I were on last night. We've seen a couple changes today, but really the impacts, at least to me right now, still all feel like we're about in the same boat as we were yesterday.
Yeah, I agree with that. We've seen a little bit of new, fresher, more reliable data today now that the system is starting to get into some regions of the Pacific Northwest where we get better sampling, weather balloon data, that sort of thing. So that's helped our models a little bit. Like Nick said, no major changes. We have seen a little bit of evidence that there may be a trend slightly back eastward again, which could potentially bring higher snow totals, but I'm not necessarily concerned about the difference between 4 and 8 inches here. That's sounds significant, but the reality is going to be the blowing snow, the high wind, and the travel disruptions due to that, because we're going to get snow. How much? Yet to be determined. It could be as low as 2, and you could have even higher totals that I'm not too confident in issuing just yet. But the issue is, no matter how much snow you have, it can blow and cause visibility issues, and that's really going to be the thing. High profile vehicles, high wind, visibility reduction, and dangerous cold wind chills. Those are the parts of this storm that we are increasingly confident in. And that track as we get closer and closer to Thursday and Friday will matter in how much snow we get and how much more of an issue this may be. But right now, Nick and Tyler, I believe that we are going to be really focusing on that wind and the blowing snow that comes with it.
Yeah, Mike, and I agree with that. And Tyler, we have decided, I've got our wind gust potential map up here. Now, this is something that we kind of felt was important to start talking about today. I know you and I talked about this, kind of off air a little earlier today. And for those of you at home, what you see here now behind me, we have Northwest Ohio, Northeast Indiana. You're kind of looking at that 50 to 60 mile per hour range, and that is really aggressive. There's some model data that actually suggests maybe even higher wind speeds than that. You get into the orange here, this is where you're talking 40 to maybe 50 mile per hour winds with some maybe isolated higher gusts. And then you get down to the south level, you're still talking 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts. And Tyler, that's still really substantial for our area, especially this time of the year. Our first real major storm system, this could really wreak havoc on power lines across the region potentially.
Yeah, it's really concerning, like you just said, for the power outage issue. And the reason why that's so significant is because of the amount of and the intensity of the cold air mass that's going to be coming in behind the system. If you go without power, if the power goes out in some of those stronger wind gusts, you really want to be prepared to try to find a place that you can get warm, or perhaps you have a fireplace or something in your house that you can heat, one specific room or something so your family can stay warm. If not, you're going to really want to find a spot that you can protect yourself and your family.
Yeah, then those are real good things. So I do want to show one more thing here as well. And again, hopefully you guys can hear and see me okay and see Mike, or you really can't see Mike and Tyler, but hopefully you can hear them okay as well. So what do we know right now? Honestly, we really haven't changed this much from yesterday. Couple reasons behind this. Number one, as Tyler and Mike have alluded to, some shifting is still ongoing with this system, and we're still getting some better sampling of this. So it's going to take a little bit longer before we really have a true, solid feel on this. If you're seeing folks out there right now saying that, hey, Toledo's going to get a foot of snow, I would pump the brakes on that significantly right now. It is still way too early to get too specific. So what do we know right now? We are still looking at a very strong storm system set to impact our region with very cold temperatures moving into Christmas weekend, and obviously winter precipitation is likely. Now on the flip side, what we don't know yet, location and the heaviest amounts of precipitation. Where is that all going to line up? That remains to be seen. And we did add one thing in here, and I'm more really kind of adding this indirectly, but there's also been a lot of chatter, Mike, regarding the word blizzard. A lot of things have to come into place for that to happen. And while it's not impossible, I still think it's relatively early to be mentioning that kind of terminology, especially because they don't happen very often here in the Ohio Valley.
Yeah, you'd be right about that. And just to kind of go over the criteria for a blizzard, I mean, we can use the term blizzard kind of colloquially in a sense of, oh, it's windy and snowing a lot, tons of snow, it's a blizzard. There isn't an actual definition of blizzard. You have to have visibility reduced to less than a quarter of a mile and 35 mile per hour sustained wind for more than 3 hours at a time. So this is a consistent high wind, low visibility. You actually don't even have to have any falling snow for this to be a blizzard. But it's the high wind and the blowing snow potential. So that's why, one of the reasons why we're very hesitant to throw that word around right now, because like Nick said, it isn't a condition, a very specific condition that happens very often. Some folks out there, I wasn't around for it, but my parents were, the blizzard of 78. That was a very unique storm. And for those of you who were around, probably know that we haven't, had something like that since then. And there's good reason for that. It just doesn't happen very frequently. It is a very outlying thing to happen. So we're treading very carefully with that word. We're not ruling it out because high wind is definitely going to be a thing. Power outage potential is going to be a thing, especially the farther north of you are, but it's not a guarantee. There could be some evolution and changes in this system. We could end up with a situation where we have more snow but less wind, and vice versa. And which is worse? Well, it really depends on where you are and what happens where you live. And that's what's so tough about these winter storms is you can't really pinpoint a specific backyard or a specific neighborhood. It's all about, this is a general region. This is what's more likely. And Nick and Tyler, I think that's kind of the situation we're still in. It's Monday. We're looking ahead to Thursday and Friday. So we're getting close. We're going to have some really good data coming in tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, I would second that. And, real quick, before we get into model day, I do want to show you our current confidence levels on what we have. I have added a couple things here today. Number one, our strong wind gust potential, anything over 40 miles per hour. We feel really confident that this is going to happen somewhere in our region. The exact locations, again, that'll be ironed out as we get a little bit closer. But I've added the threat for damaging winds here. Now, I'm not talking damaging winds that, would mean a severe thunderstorm warning type. Obviously, we're moving into winter time, so things are a little bit different. The dynamics are a little different. Winds over 50 miles per hour, we're starting to gain some confidence with that. And obviously, we showed you the map a little bit ago of what our thoughts were with the power outage risk right now being elevated. That could certainly be raised in the coming days. We'll kind of wait and see how that progresses as we continue to move along. Cold temperatures, also very high confidence with this. Wind chills 10 to 20 below zero potentially in some locations. So that's going to be a hazard. And obviously our snowfall total confidence right now pretty low. And Tyler, real quick, before we get into model data, these wind chill values are not something to mess around with. People need to be checking their furnaces, checking their pipes. Obviously, we don't want cold and busted pipes. So we're going to be dealing with at least a 2 to 3 day stretch where lows could be well down into the single digits, and any kind of wind is just going to make matters that much worse.
Yeah, and with those low wind chill values, you have to think about so many different things, like you've already alluded to with your pipes. And while wind chill values don't, affect that, going along with low wind chill values, -15, -20, whatever it may be, that means that the actual temperature has to be pretty low at that point. So you're thinking about, well, how do I dress when I go outside? Are my animals outside? Do they have proper shelter and stuff like that? And again, some of this is affected by the eventual track that this storm may take, because less snow may not allow your temperatures to get as low, and if you get a little bit more of a deeper snowpack with the clearing skies, you could really decide your temperature could just go plummet at that point. And so at this point, we're looking at negative wind chill values, but how low do we get? That all affects how we prepare for our day, how the day goes for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's kind of jump into some model data, because obviously we're talking about the cold, we're talking about the snow, we're talking about the wind. There's also a rain aspect to this, but I do want to show you some model data just in general. So this is the GFS run that ran a little earlier today, not too terribly long ago, so this is relatively fresh data, but I do want to kind of advance through this here just a little bit in time so you can kind of get an idea. We're going to go and kind of fast forward through Wednesday and into Thursday. And this has been a pretty good consensus all along. A lot of us, if not all of us, are going to start as rain. You might find a couple spots of some mixed precipitation here and there, but really at the end of the day, that's not our main culprit. That is still well off to the west. And now this is looking at Thursday, and again, a lot of us starting with some rain. Temperatures should be relatively mild, getting into the 40s. So not too bad. That's really above normal for this time of the year. But then the bottom's going to start to fall out as this Arctic front starts to kick in and move its way through. You can see very sharp cutoff between the rain and the transition to snow here. Now this is early Friday morning. You can see this is that Arctic front, this kind of backwards C looking shape here. That's the indication that cold air is going to really start to pick up and really kick in very quickly and very strong. So you're going to see this rain change to snow pretty quickly. And then once that initial band of precipitation works through, we might actually get a little bit of dry time. Now, obviously, this may cut into some snowfall totals in some locations, but that's going to allow for the wind to really crank up. I really think during the day on Friday will be our best chance of seeing some very strong wind gusts, and obviously that could cause its own problems in its own. Then some wraparound snow starts to come back in as we get later into Friday. And Tyler, I think this is probably the most uncertain part of the forecast, at least in my opinion, is how much of this wraparound snow do we get, and does the low decide to occlude itself? Because once that happens, obviously things can obviously not trend very favorably for us very quickly. But this part of the forecast to me is still, I think, the most tricky part yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that 110%. You don't really know what kind of moisture you're always going to be dealing with wraparound snow showers. But the biggest thing, and we were talking about this earlier in our group chat, was with temperature so cold, you really don't need a lot of moisture to create a snow shower. And with temperature so cold, we also don't have the normal snow ratio that we have. We generally have a snow ratio on average of, for every 1 inch of liquid, we would get 10 inches of snow. With the kind of cold air that's coming in, we may be seeing values 20 to 1, 25 to 1, and perhaps maybe even a little higher. So when focusing on the wraparound snow showers, we really have to kind of try to nail down at least how much moisture we might be dealing with. But at the end of the day, even the smallest amount of moisture will produce a snow shower.
Yeah, and really, when you add in this wind potential I've got pulled up here, any kind of snow shower that we have going to reduce visibility. This is why we're seeing a lot of people out there mentioning blizzard conditions. And as Mike alluded to, it's going to take a lot to get there. But Mike, looking at the GFS model, if this were to verify, I mean, a good portion of Ohio, 40, 50, even up to 60 mile per hour winds. And you and I talked, a little earlier about if we get any kind of dry air in place with this storm, that may allow the winds to even accelerate a little bit further potentially. I tell you, it's been a while since we've seen winds of this magnitude with a winter storm. At least, I mean, dating back to you and I talked briefly, like maybe '04, but this is certainly going to be an interesting one to watch. But certainly this wind potential, I think, kind of overshadows just about everything else for a lot of folks, I think, because it's a holiday weekend. It's also a pretty big travel weekend too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be the timing is not good for those who are going to be traveling. I mean, I myself have plans to travel on Friday. That may get pushed to Thursday now. You may have to be a little flexible with your plans. We're not telling you to cancel any plans yet, but maybe be a little bit flexible at your arrival times, and maybe consider some alternate ideas as well. That said, with the wind, that is going to be, I believe, the biggest impact of this storm. This isn't going to be a record breaking, even though we're not confident in the snowfall totals yet, it's not going to be a record breaking snowstorm as we see it now. And then, as Tyler alluded to, it doesn't take a lot of moisture to wrap around to give us a lot of snow when it's going to be this cold. We're talking a massive fall in temperatures where we could be feeling temperatures in the low to mid teens Friday afternoon and then maybe single digits after sunset. So you're going to get a little bit of moisture, but then a lot of fluffy snow. I don't know. I know we have a lot of people in the north central Ohio region that watch us. I know I spent Christmas of 2020 in Mansfield, Christmas Eve, and I remember us being initially projected to get about 3 to 4 inches, but we ended up with 9 just because of all the cold air we had in place. And it really jacked up those snowed water ratios. And we basically doubled what we thought we would get. A very fluffy, powdery, cold weather snow. That's kind of what I think might happen, especially north, places like Cleveland and even stretching back toward Toledo. And then you're going to get some lake enhancement too, especially with all that wind. And then with all that wind, you also have the potential for some power outages and high profile vehicles having a tough time out there. So there's a lot of impacts. There's a lot of ingredients, and we're watching them all very closely, Nick and Tyler.
Yeah, and real quick, I've got the temperatures pulled up. Obviously, even after the storm departs, we're going to be dealing with a lot of cold air. So these are air temperatures early Friday morning, and by Friday morning, we are already well below freezing. We've already hit our daytime high, which for a lot of us will be right around midnight, and we're just going to plummet throughout the entire day. Now, that is the temperatures. Now, let me throw on the wind chills Friday morning, and I'll zoom it into just Ohio so that some of you can kind of get an idea. I know some of those numbers may be perhaps a little bit harder to read. So you start to see these really tealish colors start to pop up. That's where we could have 10, 20 below zero wind chills, and even wind chills at or below zero for a lot of Ohio. And that's going to continue not just into Friday, but through Friday night. Wind chills, again, you can see more teal colors Friday night into early Saturday morning as well. So a very cold stretch is ahead. Make sure your pets are inside. Make sure that you have plenty of gas in your vehicles. In the event that the power goes out, make sure your battery banks are charged. We're not trying to hype this by any means, but we're just trying to get you prepared for what could come. Obviously, winds even over 40 miles per hour. We're going from rain to snow and a potential for a flash freeze. There's just so many different impacts that could happen with this. And, Tyler, I know you mentioned one of your family members is actually a lineman. And I know he's a little bit concerned about this, and they can't really get out and about and fix anything until the winds die down, which could ultimately be sometime later in the weekend. So obviously that power outage risk is definitely a concern. You've got frozen lines when you go from rain to snow. You add in the flash freeze and the plummeting temperatures. This is going to get a little dicey, I think, for a lot of folks.
Yep, it could get dicey pretty quickly. As Nick said, with the flash freeze that we could have with all that water that we've had the previous day, your road conditions could be fine one minute and be a complete mess the next. We're talking about a potential 30 to 40 degree drop in just a couple of hours from this Arctic front that's going to come blasting through. That's never a good recipe. And in a situation like that, in a situation like that, you're going to have a robust system anyway. Like we're dealing with, it's complicated trying to figure it out. And when these systems wrap up, most of the time they do pull some warm air up and warm the temperatures up just ahead of the front for a short period of time. So that's like like we've been saying, that's the stuff we're watching. It's a complicated setup, and we're still a few days away from really truly being able to give you a confident forecast for this storm.
Yeah, and that's the other key, Mike, too. Yet, um, obviously we have a different kind of policy here at Bell Park. We don't like to hype things up, and we're not going to give you, amounts or anything like that. And while we're kind of getting that kind of talk about that, I'll bring the wind gust map back up because I don't want to stay on too long here this evening, and obviously don't want to scare anybody. But we're not quite ready for any kind of snowfall map, any kind of anything of that nature just yet. I mean, obviously this wind map is a little bit early for us to probably be out here and releasing, but I think we're really confident in this part of the forecast. But we're just not quite there yet with snowfall. I mean, you mentioned it earlier today, and Tyler, we've talked about it. Still some further shifting going on. We're starting to get into guidance of some of our shorter range models, which will help us a little bit more. The energy is still coming on shore, so Mike, I think folks definitely just need to kind of be patient. I know that's kind of hard right now. Everybody wants to know what we're going to get.
Yeah, for sure. Those higher resolution models, they'll ultimately help us. They have a better resolution to really nail down a lot of specifics that those global models just don't do really well for us all the time.
Right.
You mentioned the high wind and how we're getting pretty confident with that. That's the one thing that has been pretty consistent on almost every model run is these models are showing that high wind potential. And like Mike and Nick have said, we're not here to scare you. We're here to prepare you and help protect you and make sure you're prepared for whatever comes at you. That's our job. That's our main mission as forecasters and meteorologists, is to make sure you're safe, protected, and prepared for whatever comes your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, guys, with that for right now, we're going to kind of wrap things up here this evening. I do want to share a couple different ways that you can, kind of stay in touch with us. Obviously, we've got all of our sister pages, but you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We're going to try to be live on as many platforms as we possibly can. We're going to do another video like this tomorrow evening, and each evening leading up to what we are expecting. Obviously, if we get a little bit closer, we'll get more detail. We'll show more of our own graphics with what we think, how much snow we're going to get. Obviously, we'll kind of put together some other impact graphics for you. So, but again, and also make sure if you have not already, make sure you follow us over on YouTube as well. Sometimes, Facebook acts up a little bit, and sometimes YouTube acts up a little bit. So we'll try to be live on multiple platforms for you. That way, if one of those were to go bad or something happens, you have another source. And obviously, make sure you follow all of our sister pages. Most of the time, when we go live on one, we can actually cross-post it to every one of them, which is really nice and a very big benefit for us. So, but for right now, guys, we're going to wrap things up this evening. For meteorologist Mike Joyce and forecaster Tyler Phillips, I'm Nick Dunn. Have a great night, everybody. Please stay safe out there. Don't be too panicked yet. Don't get alarmed. Don't go buy all the milk and bread and eggs just yet. You may want to get some of those things, your normal grocery type trips here over the next couple of days, and just have enough to kind of get you through the holiday weekend. So we'll see you back here tomorrow evening. Have a great night, everybody.